Hey guys, Paul here. So I had to make a video about this because we got to talk about Yu-Gi-Oh's new Genesis format that Konami just announced earlier this week. This is a new way to build decks and play Yu-Gi-Oh that I think is very surprising, very cool, very unique, and might just answer the problem of addressing the mid-core Yu-Gi-Oh player, something that I always talk about a lot. So I knew I had to just get my thoughts together and put them out in a video and then hear what other people have to say about it. So first of all, what is Genesis format exactly? Well, basically, it's a sort of new format with slightly different rules for how you build your deck. Pendulum monsters and link monsters are completely banned. You cannot play any of them, and we will talk about this a little bit more in a second. Also, every other card in the game is legal. There is no ban list. Instead, though, here's the catch. All cards have a point value attached to them. So the strongest cards will have a certain amount of points that they take up whenever you put a copy of that card in your deck. And Konami has released a list of cards that have point values associated with them. And any card that's not on that list actually is just 0 points, so you can play it completely for free. So this kind of channels a little bit of that old school Yu-Gi-Oh video game sort of vibe. If anybody's played any of the older games where like cards would have point values and stronger cards would be worth more points and you could like level up your points and all that stuff. Yeah, basically you're building a deck, but you're having to sort of draft it in the sense that, do I want to use powerful cards that are worth more points? If I do, then there's going to be a bit of a trade-off involved where I won't be able to use every single strong card or things like that. And the standard point limitation is 100 points. So your deck has to be 100 points or less in terms of power. But there is also the ability to play with smaller or higher point allocations depending on the event, but 100 is the standard. So for example, a card like Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring is 15 points if you want to run one copy of it. So running 3 copies of Ash Blossom is 45 points. And we know that Ash Blossom is a really powerful and useful card, but if you do run Ash Blossom, it means that you might not be able to run other staple cards, or even other engine type cards, because a lot of the cards on this list are also like engine related things. So for instance, your deck's starter card, like the spell that searches one of the monsters straight from the deck, might be worth, let's say, 20 or 33 points. And so that means that if you want to run it in your deck, then you're going to probably have to make a trade-off with running staple cards like an Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, or other hand traps or other power spells. It's really cool because even Pot of Greed or Graceful Charity or even Painful Choice are technically cards that you can run. Pot of Greed is worth 30 points. So you might be thinking, well, okay, I could just run 3 Pot of Greeds in all my decks. But if you do that, then that means that you might be missing out on other really useful defensive cards, staples, engine cards, things like that. So something also really cool about this is that Konami has apparently been working on this format for about 2 years. They've been workshopping it and doing R&D. And actually, the most recent round of Rivalry of Warlords decks, that's an alternative format that's played as side events at some YCS events. Yeah, the most recent round of those decks were actually using this new Genesis format rule set. And I think that's really cool because it means that if you did play with those rivalry decks at like Nationals in Indianapolis the other month, then that means that you were technically sort of like getting a bit of a beta version of this format. And now they're making it something that we can all play. So that's basically the gist of it. Now I wanted to sort of talk about the upsides, the downsides, all of this is different things that I had to say. So I've got my phone just for like a little bit of a list. Okay, so first of all, this is something that can be played at local card shops, but also it's going to be a side event or public event at YCS events. And I think that's really cool because it means that Konami is going to be trying to support it. Not only will it be a public event at all the upcoming YCSs this year, but they've promised that next year it's going to get a full dedicated YCS with its own set of prize cards. And some of the prize cards are a little insane. Like there is the Shonen Jump Dark End Dragon, the original Dark End Dragon prize card. It's not a reprint or a replica. It's like the thing. They're also going to be giving giant and oversized cards as prizes, like Giant Pot of Greed, which, by the way, just a side note, those cards are worth a lot. Like, this is coming from somebody who was actually trying to sort of bargain for a Giant Pot of Greed card as a set for our podcast over in the second channel, the Pod of Greed. So I wanted to have a giant pot of greed in the background. So I found like one of the small handful of people who have it. And let's just say those things go for a lot if you're trying to get them. So this would make for a really cool prize. But the fact that it can be played at the local level is probably the more relevant thing, because this means that this is a way to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Locally in a much lower sort of power ceiling way. Because so many decks are going to be nerfed or limited in power level, it means that you're not going to necessarily be dealing with, a bunch of FTKs, a bunch of long combos with huge boards and things like that. Again, we'll get into that a little bit more in a moment, but yeah, basically, local card shops are allowed to change the point values if they want. Konami, of course, suggests just 100 as the standard, but your locals could do a 0 points competition where any of the cards and like the 500 or so cards on the list that have point values just can't be used at all. But also, you could play with a 200 point limit or a 5,000 point limit or whatever. So effectively, I think the genius here is that you can either scale this down to an extremely low power level, which makes it like more chill for casual people or just people who are maybe overwhelmed with Yu-Gi-Oh! But also there are a lot of people who are just sort of like Yu-Gi boomers who like the idea of every old banned card being back, or people who want crazy high power levels where like you could play with max power tier limits versus max power spiral versus max power dragon rulers or zodiacs or something, and see what comes out on top, because that's always sort of a enticing, tantalizing topic in the Yu-Gi-Oh space. So that customizability, I think, is a really big strength for this. In addition to the fact that it sort of vaguely reminds me of Magic the Gathering's Commander bracket system, where, Commander format can be kind of complicated since some people are just playing more for fun, some people are playing more competitively, and so Wizards of the Coast eventually ended up making a system where like you kind of pick a bracket like level 1 through 5 that sort of dictates how many powerful cards can be used in your deck, and the idea is to sort of set a social contract with people where you're like, okay, I'm going to sit down to play Commander format, what bracket power level are we going to be playing at? This is sort of similar in that, you can just say at locals, we're just going to do a 0 points day or a 500 points day. And I think that's really cool. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about was the fact that Konami seems to be like really serious about supporting this. We already talked about the YCS thing and like the prize card thing, but I think that a benefit that this has over something like Speed Duel in the past is that you don't actually need any additional cards for this. Speed Duel, you might remember, had like the whole Speed Duel logo thing where you couldn't use a card that didn't have the logo because of, keeping track of the card pool. Yeah, again, this is well designed because all the cards that you already have are just totally legal for it, no matter what. In fact, every card in the game is legal outside of, again, that pendulum and link thing that we're going to get to. And so I think that was like a really good design. It means that this becomes accessible. It also makes a lot of the recent reprints that they've been doing in like these 10s and these quarter century sets kind of make a little bit more sense between that and like, the time traveler formats that I don't know how much people are liking those. But yeah, I think that it kind of means that it now makes sense that they've been reprinting certain old cards like Mirage of Nightmare or Galaxy Eyes Dark Matter Dragon, because now there is going to be a way that you can theoretically play those cards. So that's really cool. Okay, what has been the reception so far? Well, from what I've seen, it's honestly been pretty positive. There's actually a lot of interest in this. Konami themselves have been releasing articles on their official blog site that actually go into a lot more detail about sort of the thought process around this format, but also people have been really buzzing about this on social media. I think this was the most talked about thread on Reddit. It's been the most talked about thing on Twitter. Konami did a good job of releasing it in a way that is simple to explain, and also they even made a deck builder that you can access where you can search for cards and their point values and like put your deck together and make sure that it's legal. So, and you can even like print it out, of course, to submit it for like a tournament. I think that's really good because one of the sort of logistical issues that I've always considered with a format like this where cards have different point values or different sort of combination things is like, how do you keep up with it in a paper game? Because if this is a feature in Master Duel, which by the way, I hope it becomes one, but it'll probably take a while if it ever happens. But yeah, like in a digital game, the game will just prevent you from adding new cards to your deck. It's like, okay, you've hit the point cap. But for like physical play, that means you're gonna have to like sit here and have like a whole list to the side and like cross check. And so yeah, I think that at least making an online system for that is good. I heard that it actually shut down yesterday when they first announced it, but I think that shows how much interest there is in this. Also, Wygo Pro Deck has now added a feature for doing this. People have been using Dueling Book for it as well. So yeah, people are already like on the ball in terms of resources. And that's good because that means that people are liking it. I've actually gotten some messages from people that I did not expect to get messages from, sort of the lapsed Yu-Gi-Oh players who have heard about this and they're like interested. And they're asking me like, "Hey, Paul, like, what is this new like Genesis thing? Is this like a new master role? What is it about? Is it new, all sorts of things?" And so they're interested in trying it out. Larry, for instance, who does not really care much for playing modern Yu-Gi-Oh, was like, "Oh, this kind of piqued my interest. Can I play my Blue Eyes deck in this?" Right? And there's a few other people like that. So I thought that that's kind of good. It means that it's certainly making a buzz. There are some naysayers for sure, and some people are maybe a little bit doubtful, a little bit pessimistic about this, and I think that that's not without good reason. Konami has tried alternate formats in the past, and some of them just straight up do not make the cut. They just don't last, either from lack of support on the Konami side or just lack of interest from the players. We talked about Speed Duel briefly, but there have been plenty of other sort of weird alt formats that Konami doesn't fully commit to. I think the fact that they're making the commitment to do YCS events and even to update the card pool, or not the card pool, but the card points pool, means that this is something that they plan to take seriously. Okay, now we got to talk about the other sort of elephant in the room, which is like, what happens when cards get exploited? Because we're Yu-Gi-Oh players, and as much as Yu-Gi-Oh players don't want to admit it, everybody's a war criminal. Everybody wants to play the decks that do the most obnoxious thing. People are already looking for what is the best deck in this format. Some people think it's like Vanquish Soul K9 because it seems like that deck can be played fairly easily within the points distribution. And what happens when, like people just find FTKs or lame things with like Mystic Mine? Some people have drafted up forms of Exodia that can be played. There are people who are concerned about the fact that Dimension Shifter is worth like 5 points. So it seems like any deck could just play 3 of it easily. And I have two minds about this. The first is that you have to sort of view cards in the context of a lower power format because that actually can change things a lot. So Dimension Shifter sounds like it's like a turn skip, free, broken card, but in a format where a single turn is not seen as the end all, where like the power level is lower, so duels are expected to probably go for a few more turns, the relative power of Dimension Shifter actually tends to kind of decrease in my experience with playing it. Another thing to keep in mind too is that there is still points trade-offs happening here. Like if every deck is weaker, then it doesn't necessarily make like all cards function in the same way. Like using Dimension Shifter is cool, or using Max C is cool, but like Max C, for instance, is worth 50 points. You can run 2 Max C, but if you run 2 Max C, you won't actually have the space for any other hand traps that like you would draw with Max C. So it kind of makes the purpose of Max C a little bit different. But you could also use that same amount of points to run Molcharmi cards. Like Perulia is only 12 points, I believe, and like Fuwalos is maybe 7 or 8. And so you could, instead of using Max C, use Molcharmies. But then you actually have to ask yourself, would you even want to use Molcharmies? Because like if the format is slower and things like that, maybe those sorts of cards aren't even going to be as useful. I think that the safest way to approach this is basically like, don't assume that everything will be a complete broken mess until you play it for yourself. I think that's going to be the only real way to do it. We can talk ourselves into a circle about, is a card too strong or too busted, or is it going to break a format? But we just got to kind of like play it and find out. Be creative, see what happens. Konami has actually already said that they're going to be adjusting points values as they go. So it's something that means that they will be taking care of this format, so to speak. But also they said in their blog post from today that if a deck wins an entire YCS event, that's not going to get that deck nerfed to the ground like how it might do on a ban list. It's more about if a lot of people are playing a deck. So they want to encourage creativity. If you think that a deck is extremely powerful, then you can know that maybe they will adjust the point values and make it harder to play. But if you find something that's unique and very much your own and you win with it, you can continue to win with that until everybody picks it up and everybody's playing it, and then they might finally adjust it. So you're kind of encouraged to try new things at every event that you play at, and I think that that is a really good thing. Another thing I wanted to point out too is that I feel like a lot of people are not really reading the full like rules of this. Like a constant sort of interaction that I've seen is people saying things like, "Oh my God, Runic is going to be so broken because like none of the cards have any cost to them. They're not worth any points." And then people realize, well, the extra monster zone is actually gone. There is no extra monster zone and there are no pendulum zones. So you actually can't use the effects to summon Runic fusion monsters at all. So like, something to keep in mind. Same with Sky Striker. And I think that's actually a great segue into the fact that they did choose to leave out pendulum monsters and link monsters. Man, it's rough because I know there are some people that are kind of upset with this, but I think it was probably one of those for the greater good things. Link monsters and pendulum monsters both have a really sour reputation within Yu-Gi-Oh! As the cards that sort of alienated people, caused people to quit. It's really unfortunate, but like, Link monsters did speed this game up a lot, and a lot of the craziest combo decks and piles and things exploit Link monsters. In addition to that, from a casual player's perspective, Link monsters probably look really daunting, and Pendulum monsters we know look daunting. I've spoken to plenty of people at conventions and more casual settings, and they're always like, yeah, I stopped playing Yu-Gi-Oh! When they made those weird monster/spell things. So I think Konami took a lot of the optics of Links and Pendulums into account when they made this rule. But I think it's a little unfortunate that there are some unfortunate casualties. Like, there are certain decks that are not pendulum decks, but use pendulum monsters. So for instance, Nouvelles have a couple of support cards that are pendulum monsters, but they're not really like a pendulum deck. The same thing goes for maybe a ritual deck that maybe wanted to use like Odd Eyes Pendulum Graph Dragon. Can't use it. Or the Ryuge deck. There's another really good one. It's not really what most people would call a pendulum deck, but Sose, Ryuge, Mistva, and Anva, you just can't use them. Like, it sort of sucks. Like, you could theoretically try to make the deck work anyway, but yeah, it sort of feels like that just sucks. And there are even balanced pendulum archetypes that people want to play, like, Abyss Actors or Performa Pals maybe come to mind, but it just means that you can't do anything with those decks. I think that sort of sucks. It might be something that they adjust in the future, but it seems like they just wanted to leave them out because that makes this look more attractive to a returning Yu-Gi-Oh player. And that's also another great segue into like, who is this exactly for? Well, according to Konami, really anybody. It's a lower power level format. I think it's not so much for the Yu-Gi boomer, like the person looking for playground Yu-Gi-Oh again, because this isn't that. Like, it's still got a lot of the nuances of modern Yu-Gi-Oh. There's still chain links, there's still, chain blocking and resolution stuff and, open game state. Like, none of that's really changing. So it's not like a simplified rule set or even a simplified card pool. Like, all the modern cards are all still here. It's just that it's more for maybe the lapsed player is how I'm kind of seeing it. The player who got out of Yu-Gi-Oh! In the last like 5 to 10-ish years, right? That player who maybe quit when Pendulums came out or quit when Links came out. Now I think they'll be drawn back towards the game because they don't have to worry about the pendulum zones and the extra monster zones, all the weirdness, and they can probably play a lot of the decks that they liked because that was a Discord notification, because they fit within the power level a little bit better. So yeah, that's basically it. I think that this is a really cool format. I honestly have to say, I'm very cautiously optimistic. I'll definitely be trying it out. I want to try it out at locals. I want to play at it at YCS events. I think it's going to be really cool. I think that if you have any doubts, then just try it yourself and see if you like it. Like, I don't think it's going to be perfect out of the gate. I think a lot is going to have to be addressed through ban lists or point adjustments. I'm going to have to get used to saying that early on. But I think that Konami, they recognized that mid-core Yu-Gi-Oh! Was dying. Mid-core Yu-Gi-Oh! Needed a push. I'm one of the biggest advocates of this, and I really do believe that this is sort of going to be their answer to it. And so far, it's a really good first step. Let me consult my notes and see if there's anything else that I wanted to say about this. Does it fix Yu-Gi-Oh? I guess is the final question. And my answer is like, I don't think that we should be seeing things in binaries like that. Like, I don't think that, any one thing absolutely fixes Yu-Gi-Oh! But I think that, again, it's a step in the right direction. And that's the best that we can really ask for. So yeah, that's cool. Let me know what you guys think of the format, what decks you're going to be playing. I'm not one of these people who's going to tell you what to play. I think you should go forth, experiment, try things out for yourself, see what you like, see what resonates, see what people are talking about if you want. But at the end of the day, you're a duelist. You got to figure things out for yourself. Okay, cool. I will be testing this out. We might make some content for it over here on the channel. And that's it. I've gone on long enough. I'll see y'all in the next one. Pass turn.